So hello and officially welcome and thank you for joining us today for Orienting Your VISTA, Implementing Your On-Site Orientation and Training Plan. I'm Jessica Birch with the Corporation for National and Community Service in Washington, D.C., and I'll be your host for today's webinar. And I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. Also joining us are Rachel Raddick and Andy Clark from our partners at Education Northwest, who have helped to prepare today's webinar and will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and Q&A to help address questions that you have during the session. So what do we hope that you get out of this session today? First, we want you to learn how to best prepare your VISTA and prepare for your VISTA's arrival at site. We also want you to understand essential conversations to have with your VISTA that are really key to have during OSOT, or on-site orientation and training. We also hope that you use the VISTA assignment description, or VAD, to guide training and professional development. And then last, we definitely want to talk about some of the troubleshooting things that can happen during OSOT and how to mitigate those things as they come up, or how to plan for them. So I am delighted to welcome our speakers for today. First is Ryan. Ryan Fewens-Bliss is a National VISTA trainer with Education Northwest, which is CNCS's training partner. In his quote-unquote day job, he serves as the Deputy Director for Community Investment at Michigan College Access Network, or MCAN. Ryan hails from Northern Michigan and received his undergraduate and graduate degrees from Central Michigan University in Integrated Public Relations and Educational Administration and Community Leadership, respectively. Ryan also served as a consultant to local, state, national nonprofits and educational institutions. He has managed both VISTA and AmeriCorps state programs, and he served as a locally elected township trustee in Michigan's Bath Charter Township for almost 5 years, and currently serves as an appointed member of the Bath Township Public Library Board of Trustees. I'd also like to welcome our VISTA supervisor speakers for today. The first is Amanda Whittemore. Amanda oversees the Initiative Foundation's AmeriCorps VISTA project that places and supports VISTA members across central Minnesota. She is also a VISTA alum and credits her time as a National Service member to being a critical piece of her professional and personal development. I'd also like to welcome Erica Bieland. She served as a VISTA member with the Rural Renewable Energy Alliance, or RREAL, in a project sponsored by the Initiative Foundation in central Minnesota from 2016 to 2017. Following her year of service, she was hired on as a full-time employee at her VISTA host site to continue the work of fighting energy poverty with solar power as their program development specialist and their VISTA supervisor. So thank you all today for joining us. I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Ryan, who's going to really get us kicked off. Ryan, take it away.
Thanks, Jessica. It's really great to be with everyone today. As you heard, I've got lots of experience with AmeriCorps and VISTA. I really couldn't love it more, and I love being able to continue to talk about how we all generally do better at this work together. Why don't we get started into the content today? You may have noticed that today's session is the second in a two-part session about on-site orientation and training, or OSOT. We're going to build off from the first webinar today, so welcome back any of you who joined us for that first webinar. But if you didn't, don't worry. This content will still be applicable. You'll be able to pick right up where we left off. We're really talking about implementation today. Previously, we talked about planning, getting your plan together, getting your plan approved, getting it ready, and now we're going to talk about executing that plan. So let's first begin with how best to prepare your VISTA before their arrival. Thinking about preparing for your VISTA's arrival, I think, is not too difficult a job. Really just put yourself in the VISTA's shoes. All of us have started a new job before. What is it that we wanted to know before we arrived on our first day of work? I recommend calling or emailing the VISTA beforehand to really settle any last-minute details, to ensure that they're ready to start on that first day. I find it helpful to stay connected to your VISTA in the time between selection and their first day. Sometimes that can be weeks, and for me it has even been months, depending on how early you do your recruitment. Keeping connected, though, is a retention strategy. It seems obvious that you'd stay connected and communicating to your VISTA, but I can't tell you how many times VISTAs have come up to me at a break in the PSO schedule when I'm facilitating, and they'll say something to the effect of, I don't know where I'm supposed to be on Monday. Where do I show up? Or when am I supposed to show up at the office? Nobody has told me these things. Or even I've heard, I'm not sure who my supervisor is. I'm sure that's not any of you on the call, but trust me, I hear it all the time. it seems it's important to share with everyone. Another good idea is to provide your VISTA with a copy of the OSOT agenda before they arrive so they know what to expect. Sample agenda, I believe, was emailed to you along with the webinar reminder, and it will also be posted with the recording if you want to see that again. You want to give them all the key information that they need around several topics. What time to arrive, as I mentioned, where to go, including parking, etc., what the dress code is. I had tons and tons of dress code issues in my day, and so talking about that beforehand is helpful. Tell them to bring any of their materials from PSO or from VMO that they've created and that they want to talk about with you or if they have questions on. And again, share that OSOT schedule. Most offices I know require some sort of paperwork of new employees that would also be applicable to a new VISTA in your office. So my office just moved locations, and when we moved, I felt like I had to sign a ton of paperwork. I had to sign a form to get keys and another form to get a parking garage card. So items like these can be sent beforehand for the VISTA to review and fill out and then processed on their first day. Be sure you've carved out enough time to spend with your VISTA that first day and really the subsequent days as well. It's really critical that they've got time with their supervisor throughout OSOT, really, really critical. And finally, ensure you've prepped their workspace. And I want to dig into the concept of workspace a little further. VISTAs really should have dedicated workspace, meaning a space for them to come to every day that they can rely on, sort of a home base for them. When they feel like they have that home base, they're less likely to feel detached, and as you can guess, the less detached they feel, the less likely they are to leave before their service has been completed. And we know how important that is, that they stay until the end of their year of service. All VISTAs should have access to a computer and a telephone and internet access, just as any staff member at your organization would. I also recommend that agencies provide an email address that matches the rest of the organization. So if I'm a staff member in the organization and my email would be ryan@agency.org, you should mirror that format for the VISTA, since they're going to be sending out official correspondence as a member of your team. You don't want them to use their personal account for a variety of reasons, especially if their email address is something like unicornsandbutterflies@gmail.com. Some agencies don't want to create new email addresses every time a new VISTA is brought on, basically every year. So they create a generic account that can be passed on from VISTA to VISTA over the years. There's some benefits to that, and there's also some drawbacks to that, but it's better than no email address. If for some reason your agency won't issue an email, I'd really encourage the VISTA to create a new VISTA-specific email on some system like Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo, some free email account, something along the lines of DetroitHungerVista@gmail.com, so they can use it professionally. Finally, to show your VISTA that you're ready for their arrival and you're excited about their year, ensure that their workspace has been cleaned and is stocked with the necessary office supplies. It seems funny and simple, but not having a workspace ready for your VISTA can really communicate something that you don't intend, like you're not prepared, or you're not excited about their arrival, or basically that you're a hot mess. None of these things is what you're trying to communicate to a VISTA on their first day, or probably any time throughout their year of service. Remember that it's not just you as a supervisor who's bringing a VISTA on board. It's the organization. So it's important that your colleagues are also prepared for the VISTA's arrival. You want them to say things to the VISTA like, "Oh, Ryan, we've been so excited about you joining us this year," rather than, "Oh, what was your name? Didn't we just bring on a new VISTA recently?" So remind your staff that the VISTA's coming and that you'd love their help in welcoming them. Bring them into the fold for your OSOT. I'm a real big fan of sharing the VAD with my colleagues and others in the organization, basically. You worked hard on it, so share it. Even if they don't read it, they'll have the information available to them should they need it in the future. And it sort of communicates and shows that I'm counting on them to be part of this process. I've always booked time with my colleagues in their calendar whose work is going to connect in some way to the service that the VISTA is performing during their year. So I'll schedule a 30 or a 60-minute meeting with them as appropriate so they can get to know each other, the VISTA and my colleague, and that my colleague can describe his or her work to the VISTA. Key for me, though, is that I don't attend these meetings with the VISTA, so they can start building their own rapport with the others in the office, and it allowed me to steal a few minutes back in my own office and answer some emails or return phone calls that have probably been piling up while I've been spending my day or days with the VISTA for OSOT. So I always look at it as a win-win. Finally, it's important to ensure that your colleagues understand the basics of VISTA, meaning the VISTA terms and conditions. They should know things like the prohibited activities, the concept of the living allowance, the basic tenets of VISTA as a poverty alleviator. As those of you who are Boy Scouts know, the motto is, it's important to be prepared. Our guest speakers have a ton of experience preparing for a VISTA's arrival, and so I want to give them a chance to join in this conversation. Amanda, why don't we start with you? As an intermediary supervisor, how do you help your sites prepare for the arrival of their VISTAs? And how does the prep continue to be a successful OSOT?
Sure, great. Thanks, Ryan. It's great to be here today. I've been an intermediary supervisor at a sponsoring organization for just about 5 years, and during this time I've learned that in order to have a successful OSOT, it's really essential for supervisors to be prepared for day one of their VISTA's arrival. Some things that we do to help prepare is to track on the VISTA status in advance of their arrival in regard to locating and securing things like housing, child care, and public assistance, and help where you can. Most sites have lots of connections and networks that you could tap into. As Ryan mentioned, I want to underscore the importance of talking with staff, board, and possibly even volunteers to prepare them for the VISTA's arrival and ensure they understand the VISTA's unique role and project. This helps manage expectations about the VISTA's role and can help avoid issues like staff feeling upset that the VISTA doesn't take turns manning the front desk because they understand that VISTA's activities are generally restricted to capacity building. For a VISTA that's not relocating and is local, you might consider inviting them to the office for coffee ahead of their start date just to get to know them more, and this could help alleviate those first day jitters. I'll also add that for supervisors, know that onboarding a VISTA is a front-end loaded process and will take some extra time in the first few weeks and months before the VISTA is really able to catch their stride. So before the VISTA even starts service, sit down and dedicate some time and space in your schedule to be available to them. Erica is one of our sub-site supervisors I've had the pleasure to work with, and she has come up with some great ways to prepare for her VISTAs. Erica?
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. As Amanda said, as said before, I used to be a VISTA myself, so I've both been through my organization's OSOT and helped and been part of conducting it. So one thing that I just want to mirror what Amanda said is that being in correspondence before is really key and meeting the expectations of the VISTA. So for us, that's really key because we are located in a rural area. We have about 900 people in the town we're located in. So being upfront that we are in a small town via email and before the VISTA gets there, and that in our area having a car is really helpful to get around. That might apply to anywhere, but just being upfront about that it's helpful if you have a car and if you're able to have one if you're moving to the area. And then we also really love to keep communicating the mission even before the VISTA gets here so they know what we're about and that we'll support them in any way as they move into the area. So helping with housing is something that we always do. And I just wanted to reiterate again, as mentioned before, but that having space ready for the VISTA is also great because that's their first home as they come into your office, and so that really helps a lot when they already have a space ready and that's welcoming and ready before they even get there. Thanks. Back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks, Amanda. You know, it's nice to hear from someone who's a VISTA who, you know, both of you have been VISTAs, and then now you're in the supervisor role. So you have, you know, kind of that, hey, if I was a VISTA, I would have loved to see this, and then now actually having to do that. I think that's great. So now we want to hear from you all in the audience. What practical strategies have you found useful in preparing for your VISTA's arrival? So let us know in the chat. Make sure you're sent to all participants so that everyone can see. It could be something very simple. You know, Amanda said, you know, if they're local, meeting for coffee one day. They're already in town, you know, kind of just give them some expectations, get them to meet the quote-unquote boss before that first day with everyone else. And even if they're not, you know, local, just being in contact with them. Hey, how are you doing? Have you found housing yet? Or we're really excited to see you. Here's our most recent newsletter. Something like that really keeps them engaged from that point when you recruited them to when they actually start. So let us know in the chat. We do have a few things coming in here. So we do have a supervisor who said sending a detailed mass email that includes agenda, location of the OSOT, and having the members reply all and introduce themselves to each other. So that's great. So if you, it sounds like you have a larger project, maybe you have a bunch of VISTAs coming on at one time, that's a great way for them to get to know each other even before they arrive on site. We have another supervisor here, Jason, who says have a member manual or handbook. That could either be the VISTA handbook that we have, also the one at your organization. So letting them review that, letting them come into the office with questions that they may have. Also introducing the VISTA via email to the staff. That's a great way as well to introduce them so that you can start chatting with the staff ahead of time. We also have here clear linkages between PSO, the pre-service orientation, the on-site orientation, and the VAD. Those are great. We're going to talk about that. I think you looked at our notes before you typed that in there. And then LaShawn here says, we host an open meeting with possible persons or departments they may engage with and provide information and take any questions they may have. That's great. Letting them time to, like, what is on your mind? What do you have questions about? So those are wonderful. Ryan, these are such great suggestions.
Yeah, those are really great, and as you mentioned, we'll dig into some of these topics. So we know we're on the right track, and you're all on the right track with us. Sometimes, however, that right track goes off track, and OSOT doesn't go as planned. In fact, I would argue it never goes as planned, or at least it never went as planned for me. So entering OSOT with flexibility on your mind is really going to be key. If for some reason you're not able to be present during the VISTA's first day, you have a vacation, or heaven forbid you have an illness, it's important to have a built-in backup plan into that OSOT plan. So is there a trusted colleague who could pick this piece up for you? Does your boss or the executive director need to step up here? Or maybe you have an HR person in your organization. This is a situation where if you know it will happen beforehand, you can prepare the VISTA for that prior to the first day, so it's not a surprise for them. Having a backup person who knows the schedule of the OSOT and can fill your shoes in the case of a planned or unplanned absence is a really smart strategy. Even if you don't have someone at your office who can implement the OSOT on your behalf, just having someone be the person to greet and welcome the VISTA and show them around is really, really helpful. There's also instances where your VISTA member may not be able to arrive on site as scheduled. Maybe they're relocating and they've run into issues traveling to their site. Maybe they're ill and can't start until the following day. Whatever the reason is, you'll want to work closely with your VISTA candidate and your corporation state office to determine your next steps. If you're notified ahead of time of the delay, you can plan with your state office and give the candidate an update on what needs to be done and how to proceed. This is another reason why, as I was mentioning, keeping in touch with your VISTA candidate from when they're selected to when they start is really, really important. Illness and unexpected emergencies usually can't be planned for, of course, so working with your state office as these issues come up is going to be really key to ensuring that everyone's informed with what needs to happen next. Sometimes, especially in larger offices, the workspace won't be ready for the first day. That could be that literally the space isn't ready, or that the VISTA doesn't have a phone yet, or even the VISTA doesn't have a computer system login. Inevitably, something will require some more time to finalize, in my experience. It's important to be able to improvise and address this specific to each problem. So if the computer login is not available, can you log in the VISTA for the day with yours? If they have a required webinar, can they use your computer for that webinar for the day? Do you have spare computers in the office? Be creative. Even if you've got to start your day at the Starbucks because your office is unexpectedly getting fumigated or something crazy like that, you can get a lot done with an internet connection and some good conversation, I've found. So let's shift and start talking about getting your VISTA settled once they arrive. I like to have them meet the staff and get settled into their space. I always like to do a quick tour of the office, and as we move along through the office, introduce the VISTA to everyone we come across, including those that may or may not have daily interaction with the VISTA. I think it's important to integrate them into the culture right away. I'm also really aware that the VISTA is probably going to feel like I'm hovering that first day, so I like to give 1 or 2 opportunities for the VISTA to just get settled. Chill out, log into their email, unpack anything they brought for their desk. Just take a breather to help them process all this information they're going to be taking in. Inevitably, they're going to be a little bit overwhelmed by all the excitement. You want to make sure you keep to your agenda so that things move along and you don't end up having multiple topics that you have to push off to a different day because you start to run out of days to push things off to. The VISTA is going to stay interested and attentive when you keep things moving along at a good clip. And then throughout OSOT, you want to make sure that you gauge the comprehension of the materials and the content that you're providing to the VISTA. I usually try to make this fun and lighthearted, maybe a quick quiz now and then. I had multiple VISTAs, though, at my site, so it was easier for me to make things lighthearted with a big group of people. You'll have to find what works for you without seeming overbearing to the VISTA. Simply asking, how might you approach this problem, I think is a really good start to see if they're taking in all of the nuance of your work. It also helps them feel like they're part of the team, they're contributing really quickly. One of the obvious ways that a VISTA will receive information is through asking questions. So you want to make sure you allow time for asking questions, have a free flow ability for some chat with the VISTA. PSO, if they go to PSO, prompts them to literally write down questions to bring back to ask you, and has a whole presentation on asking good questions. So they'll get some good exposure to that. If your VISTA is participating in the virtual member orientation, VMO, there's a worksheet as part of VMO that you can do alongside them to help them with those questions. Most people are going to have a ton of questions around culture and processes of new workplaces. So it's helpful, I think, to remember what's totally obvious to you today may have seemed really mysterious or confusing to you on your first day in your office. Through the comprehension checks and the questions the VISTAs are asking, you're going to determine if you need to add or expand to your OSOT topics. You're going to see if they're picking things up. Sometimes you may even be able to scale back some of the content that you've planned if your VISTA is really picking up what you're putting down. If they've really got something down, you can move quicker. All along the OSOT path, you want to make sure to seek feedback from the VISTA. You don't want them to be really bored because they did catch on really quickly, and you also don't want them to feel really overwhelmed because you're just raining information down on them so fast. So schedule some check-ins that are only about that, just checking in to determine how things are going and seeking their feedback. During the check-ins that I just mentioned, I encourage you to take advantage of the time together, beyond just seeking the feedback, which is important in itself. I like to make these more casual chats over lunch, or I think as Amanda mentioned, over coffee, so it doesn't feel like a formal HR official conversation. Building that relationship between the VISTA and the supervisor is just so critical during OSOT, so that casual talk is important. Here's some questions I like to ask as part of the OSOT for each VISTA. What are some things from the VAD which you are really excited about starting? What are some of the things that are making you anxious? What can we do to make you feel ready to tackle for your year of service? One of the key parts of OSOT is discussing and digesting the VAD. I think Jim in the chat was just talking about connecting OSOT to the VAD, the VISTA assignment description. If the VISTA doesn't understand the VAD after OSOT, you've got some challenges rolling into the remainder of your year of service. A mutual understanding is really critical so neither of your expectations are off throughout the year. Depending on the pre-service experience in which your VISTA has participated, how you handle the VAD discussion will probably look a little bit different for pre-service orientation VISTAs or virtual member orientation VMO VISTAs. VISTAs who participate in that traditional PSO experience will have had some dedicated time to review the VAD, discuss with their peers, ask some questions to facilitators like me. They should arrive with some notes, some questions, and a marked up VAD to discuss with you. I recommend carving out a chunk of time that's simply titled VAD, and then you can review what your VISTA worked on at PSO. VISTAs who participate in the new VMO experience are recommended to take the Understanding Your VAD online in-service course as part of the VMO experience. This will provide a really good start for your VAD conversation during OSOT that you can build upon. Since your VISTA probably won't arrive with the same amount of notes and questions as those that attend PSO, I'd recommend a longer VAD discussion during your OSOT implementation. I've talked to you a lot. I'm really eager to hear again from our experts that we have on the call. So let me turn it back over to Amanda. Amanda, can you talk about some interesting ways that you helped engage your VISTAs in the OSOT?
Sure. It's so important to set the tone for the year of service and make the VISTAs feel really welcome and supported. So on the first day, you could decorate their workspace, bring in some treats, take them to lunch, have a welcome basket with some new office supplies, phone directory, staff roster, and informative materials on the OSOT ready for them at their desk. You could do a press release in the local newspaper to announce your VISTA members' arrival. This is really great PR for the host site and the VISTA program, and a fantastic way to launch the VISTAs project. You could have staff provide a list of their best bargains in town that could be provided to the VISTA, since they'll of course be living on a budget, and this could be really especially helpful for VISTAs that have relocated. And on that note, if the VISTA has relocated, have them do a scavenger hunt around town to learn more about the local community and locate important places like the police station, grocery store, pharmacy, things like that. Erica, what fun ways have you engaged your VISTAs?
Yeah, in addition to what Amanda said, we always have a welcome card ready for the VISTA on their desk when they first get here. And it's really important for us to get them excited about what we're doing, and so we invite them to our staff meeting the first day and introduce them to everyone. And then we install solar installations, so going on a tour of all of the sites that we have and getting to know some of the key communities in the area through that tour, and some of our partners, introducing them to them as well. And then we always give the VISTAs a gas card and some gift certificates, like to the local grocery store. And then eating, on our way on the solar tour, we usually eat at the best restaurants in town, so that the VISTA gets to try them if they want to try those in the future as well. And then in Minnesota, a classic dish that we have is called a hot dish, which is basically a casserole. So just kind of getting oriented, especially if the VISTA is not from Minnesota, oriented to Minnesota in general. We had an informal gathering with the team and had hot dish with everyone. So back to you, Ryan, and whatever you have next.
Erica, I'm super disappointed about that. Every trip I've ever taken to Minnesota, I thought when they were talking about hot dish, they were talking about me. So I guess it's a learning opportunity for me. Thanks for those great ideas. I really love that idea about the welcome basket, too. Who doesn't love a nice basket of fruit on their desk when they get in the morning? Those were great, ladies. Thanks. Now, unfortunately, there are things that can go wrong when settling in with your VISTA as well. As we've already discussed, being ready to troubleshoot is really, really important. Ensuring the OSOT plan has movable parts is important, so they can be adjusted by being off schedule. So if you're off schedule, you can pick pieces up and move them to different days and different times. It allows you to be ready for emergencies or other occurrences that might throw off your plan. Another place where troubleshooting might be necessary is if the VISTA is either surprised by some pieces of the OSOT, sort of in a negative or worrisome way, or if the VISTA seems overwhelmed by the information or expectation of the role. It's really important to check in as you go to ensure the VISTA is channeling your needs into excitement and not into anxiety or disgruntlement. I'm not really a touchy-feely type of guy, so this stuff is sometimes difficult for me, but I've found if I don't allow for some breathing room during OSOT, it can feel like a factory floor rather than a nonprofit who cares about people and the environment and animals. If the VISTA is surprised about something I'm asking him or her to do, that's usually a failure on my part, actually, to communicate those things beforehand. They should be in the VAD, and the VAD should have been shared a long time ago. There really shouldn't be surprises, but where there is, checking in with the VISTA to ensure they feel okay with these tasks is really, really important. Where they don't feel okay, creating a plan to get them there should be sufficient and probably job one. That same is true with feeling overwhelmed. Allowing them to be open and honest about those feelings is really helpful. Those feelings are normal. trust me that it's better to know when there might be a problem sooner rather than later. It's better than that, it's better than having a VISTA that hides their concerns from you. You want to be able to problem solve, not discover the problem 6 months from now. So I want to hear more from you. So I'm going to transition over to Jessica to do another chat. What do you folks have to say?
Thanks, Ryan. You know, I'd make a different error with the hot dish. I'd be like, they'd be like, bring a hot dish. I'd be like, great, I'm gonna bring like baked bread. Like I would be like, it's hot. Like it's a hot dish. So I did not, you know, did not understand the casserole thing. But going back to some troubleshooting things, how have you all in the audience adjusted your OSOT in real time to improve implementation of your plan? So as Ryan mentioned, maybe you got a little off schedule. So, you know, maybe as he mentioned earlier, maybe your VISTA member, you know, didn't really need to have a deeper dive into a certain topic, so that could make up for the time that you spent talking about something for longer. Also, maybe they're surprised by some of their roles that they're going to be taking on. How have you adjusted? Like, how have you made sure that that's clear? How have you rectified that? So let us know in the chat. Remember to send your ideas to all participants. So Ryan, you're a VISTA supervisor. What other ways have you? What is the way that you've done this before? You've had to adjust in real time.
Well, I was an intermediary VISTA supervisor, so once VISTAs went to PSO, they would come back and they would meet with me as the intermediary for another 3 days of training, if you can believe it. And sometimes that communication didn't translate to them, and instead of coming to us at the intermediary site, they would go to their local sites, which were all across the state of Michigan. It wasn't like they were down the road. So sometimes we would have to like Skype or video, Google Hangout them into the training, or we would say, get in your car and come as fast as you can, and we'd have to catch them up, you know, legally and safely, of course. So we'd catch them up later, or we'd have to pick them up the next day. So that was a mistake that has happened once or twice on our part. And again, it's one of those times where you sort of look in the mirror and say, I probably could have communicated this a little bit better and made it really clear.
That makes sense. Yeah. How many of us have accidentally gone to the wrong place before? Looks like a lot of suggestions here are carving in extra time during the day to make room for the unexpected. So, you know, you want to cram everything in. You're like, I have 8 hours a day with this VISTA. Like, I want to cram everything in, but I know at least for the meetings that I have, like, we have a plan and we inevitably fall behind. Something takes longer, so leaving extra time, or at least not filling every single minute, or at least allowing your time, you know, having presentation of 30 minutes, but then setting aside 45 or an hour, if in case it goes longer, is a great idea. Keep those coming, put them in the chat, and we're going to move on to the next piece here that Ryan's going to talk about, which is needs assessment. So Ryan, back to you.
Thanks, Jessica. Typically, implementing your OSOT plan means that you're spending more time with your VISTA on site. This is a perfect time to start assessing the needs of your VISTA. We've mentioned that in a few places already. You're looking for ways to adjust your OSOT implementation to accommodate these needs. But you're also looking for places in which you or the VISTA would like to see them grow or develop. This year-long plan for growth is what we call the Individual Development Plan, or IDP. There's several ways to assess the needs of your VISTA. The first is through the materials you've been given and the discussions you've had as part of the interview process. Clearly, there were some strengths that made you choose to bring this person on board, but typically there are also some gaps that need to be filled. There are no perfect VISTAs. Let me repeat that. There are no perfect VISTAs, so it's best to approach the needs assessment with that in mind. You may have a VISTA that's really great at writing, and will be able to create wonderful grant applications, let's say, but perhaps they have no social media experience, and that's part of your expectation in the VAD. That would be an area that you could determine from their resume or their cover letter or in your interview or even their AmeriCorps application. You would be able to see that there's this gap in no social media experience. A second way to understand where the VISTA might have some needs is simply to ask them. Go figure. If you approach this process in an open fashion with a spirit of growth and development, the VISTA should hopefully feel comfortable enough to self-identify where some weaker spots are. One thing to do is to have them review the VAD and circle or highlight any areas in which they want to focus on becoming more skilled. That's an easy task for them. And then finally, the Individual Development Plan, or IDP, is a tool itself for these purposes. Those VISTAs that attended PSO will have partially completed an IDP once they arrive to you for OSOT. You can use this as a launching pad for a deeper discussion about growth and development. You can also utilize the IDP template, which is available on the VISTA campus, as an activity that the VISTA completes as part of their VMO. Let's jump into a poll. I want to hear about you again. Jessica, you want to lead this?
Definitely, I love polls. So, poll question, have you developed an individual development plan for either yourself or with your VISTA or for a VISTA member? Have you ever had experience in doing that? So on the right-hand side, you'll see the poll, and it'll be on that right-hand side. You can toggle yes or no. I'm looking, it looks like maybe this poll accidentally ended quickly. Let me look here.
Sorry about that, Jessica. We'll have to maybe shoot that into a chat.
All right, so we're gonna impromptu it here. So in the chat, have you ever developed an individual development plan? Type in yes or no or Y or N. It could be for yourself. It could be with or for your VISTA member. So yeah, yes, no, Y, N. Do it in different languages, however you want to do it. So I'm getting a mix here. Ryan, looks like we have like people on both sides. Yes, not with the VISTA. Yes, I did it for myself. Some people are saying no, they've never done it before. No for a VISTA, it's the first time VISTA, so okay. And then Gary says no, this is all new for our agency, so that's great, Gary. So Ryan, it's really a mixed bag here. Some people have, some people haven't. So you want to talk a little bit more about what exactly we mean when we're talking about it and how to really develop it?
Yeah, I'll jump into that next. I think that's really important to talk about. If you've never done this before, no worries. I think it's pretty simple. If you have, great. You are an old hat at this, and you'll be able to do it really well. On your screen is, in a moment, you'll see a sample IDP, Individual Development Plan, from the VISTA roadmap that you can find on the VISTA campus. So you can find this actual IDP on the campus if you'd like to use it. But also it's simple enough that you could develop or adapt your own version as you see fit. In the left column, the knowledge or the skill is listed to be developed. So you can see grant writing is listed as an example there. In that middle column, the priority of the development of that skill is listed. Is this a skill the VISTA needs in their first 3 months? Then that's probably a high priority. If it's something they won't necessarily need until closer to the end of their year of service, perhaps that means that the priority is low. And then finally, in the third column, it's 4 ideas where the VISTA could develop that skill that they've listed. So in this case, who provides grant writing, training, or resources? So it could be from a partner like a United Way. They do great trainings all across the country, or even from an internal resource to your organization. And then I always recommend the VISTA campus because there's so many resources there on almost any topic you can think of. Research has supported that when you write something down, it is more apt to happen. So I tell VISTAs that all the time when talking about the IDP. Writing down how you want to develop helps keep them and you, frankly, as supervisors, focused on this part of their year of service and on the accomplishment of their VAD. Finally, it's not uncommon to assess the skill level of your VISTA differently than you had previously assessed, or as you spend more time with him or her, you'll get to know them better and can see. Sometimes that assessment is in the wrong direction, meaning they're lacking some skills you thought were present. This may need to change your timeline then for implementing your VAD so that you can find and provide some training to the VISTA to get them to the place they need to be so they can tackle that VAD assignment. This might be the most critical piece to setting you and the VISTA up for a successful year, ensuring that the VISTA is ready to tackle those key tasks in the VAD. Let's go back to our local experts, and I want to hear from Amanda. Amanda, can you share about how you ensured that a VISTA is prepared to start accomplishing their VAD? What were some of your strategies?
Sure. So Ryan, as you noted, make sure there's conversation about that VAD in advance of starting service, and especially in advance of PSO, to ensure the VISTA has a really good understanding of the mission of the host site, the VISTA project, their role in the work, and how all of those pieces fit together. Because, you know, it's really important to manage the VISTA's expectations about their national service experience in the project, because it's generally not reality that disappoints, but unmet expectations. So manage those expectations on the front end. Remember that in some cases, VISTA might be someone's first professional experience or first experience in your particular field. So it's important to manage your own expectations about the VISTA's performance, especially in the early weeks of service. So tell the VISTA they're not expected to know everything, and that it's okay to ask questions, and in fact, set an expectation with them that you expect they'll have questions. So keep those lines of communication open. I really like the idea of a rating tool and an IDP. Along those lines, we use a logic model tool to help the VISTA break down the VAD objectives and action steps into even smaller, tangible pieces and give them a process to anticipate barriers and identify resources and training they'll need to be successful on the front end of their service year, so those things can be addressed early and the VISTA is more confident to hit the ground running. Erica, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Just to add to what Amanda said, sometimes there's a learning curve, and especially with an organization like ours, we have a lot of learning to do in regards to solar. So if there's something like that with your organization, during OSOT we have a presentation about solar to make sure everyone understands how it works in Minnesota. So if there's something like that, I think that's really helpful in making sure there's some of the education needed. And then another thing that we do is, especially at the beginning, have weekly meetings scheduled in our calendars to keep asking questions about the VAD as needed, and then those can sometimes continue throughout the whole year, but sometimes then we don't have them every week and maybe just once a month. And then communicating about working styles and making sure that you understand how each other work. I think that was already said. And then finally, one thing that we do is having the VISTA own when they're going to get the tasks accomplished on their VAD. So going through the VAD each time and then saying, okay, we're going to complete this by this day, and then having it shared on both of our calendars so that we can hold each other accountable to that goal. That's all I have. Back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks, Amanda. Erica, I love that you said that it's kind of you work with your VISTA member to say, hey, when do you think you could get this done? Let's plan, let's hold each other accountable. I think that's really great. Sometimes you can look at the VAD, it can look a little overwhelming. We have, Ryan, I'm sure would echo this, is people at pre-service orientation or in the virtual member orientation say, oh my gosh, my VAD, I don't know how they're expecting me to do this as one person in a whole year, but breaking it up into those smaller chunks and like piecing out, this should be done by this date can help minimize that feeling of overwhelm. So now we want to hear from you. How do you ensure that your VISTA is prepared to start accomplishing their VAD? Do you, do you make sure to go over with them their VAD way ahead of time? Do you go over the VAD with them during the interview process? Do you, ask them their level of knowledge about the work that your organization does? How do you prepare them? So let us know. Send your notes in the chat. Send to all participants. So let us know how you prepare your VISTA members to accomplish their VAD, because it is a real key piece. There's not one way to do it. There's not one right way to do it. As you've heard from Amanda and Erica, they do a bunch of different stuff. So as you type those in the chat, we're going to take a look at those here, but we're going to move on to the next piece. Ryan, this cannot be the only thing that we ever have to consider. Are there any other considerations we need to talk about when it comes to OSOT?
No, there's no other. As every other webinar will show you, we've covered everything there is to cover. Of course, there are additional considerations that we have to think about. We don't have time to dig into all of these. These could probably be their own webinars and sessions themselves. But think about presentation quality. Always think about technology. Some of our guest speakers mentioned that. Think about your partner schedule and their availability during OSOT. And then, of course, we've mentioned a couple of times the intermediary and sub-site dynamic. How will that play out in the OSOT as well? I want to wrap things up with just a quick top 5 list, some great, awesome ways to strengthen your OSOT. I think it's always helpful to end on something tangible. So here's some ideas for you to use in your own OSOT. Build a scavenger hunt. Send your VISTA around the community to see and find and learn things. Where you have more than one VISTA, this might even be a chance for some friendly competition. I like to do an interview with ... You could set up your VISTA with someone they can interview and learn from. It could be one of your seasoned volunteers. It could be an organization leader within the agency. It could be a community partner, or it could even be a donor. What a great way to engage all of those people. Think about multimedia. Is there a movie or a video that would help to add some context that would make things a little bit more exciting for your OSOT? I always like the concept of job shadowing, having your VISTA spend time with people in the field or any of the people we mentioned previously with the interview idea. It's a really cool way for them to see what it really looks like to serve your organization and your community, and again, another way to engage those other external and internal constituents. And then always, always, always do a welcome lunch. This is a strong recommendation for me. It's my go-to tip for any VISTA's first day. Take those folks out to lunch, please. Whether it's just you in the VISTA or your entire office or your entire department, really make them feel welcome. Take a break from all the great learning that you're doing to get to know each other, and let's be honest, they're not going to eat very fancy this next year of service, so help them get some sustenance. Folks, that is it from me, and Amanda and Erica, thanks so much for your ears and your participation. Jessica's going to wrap us up today.
Thank you, Ryan. And I do just want to say, going back to that welcome lunch, also you could also do a potluck and then let the VISTA take home all the leftovers. That'd be a nice thing. They can stock their fridge. Another way to get them some more sustenance, as Ryan said.
Get your hot dish on, right?
Exactly, hot dish. We'll all go to Erica's and get a hot dish. Done. Now we want to hear what you thought. We have an evaluation on the right-hand side of the screen. Please let us know what you thought. Let us know what you loved, what you didn't like as much, what you want more of. We do these webinars and these sessions for you, and we want to make sure that you're getting the information you need to be the best supervisor possible. So go ahead and do that. It's on the right-hand side of the screen, and it will be up for a bit, so you have time to take it. And I'm now going to ask our operator to come back on the line so that we can start the Q&A session. So they're going to let us know how you can ask a question over the phone. Creighton, are you there?
Yes, I am, and if you'd like to ask a question from the phone, please press *1 and record your name when prompted. To withdraw your question, it's *2. And again, to ask a question, please press *1.
Thank you so much. So as we wait for questions to come in over the phone, let's go ahead and start tackling some of the questions that came in over the chat and in the Q&A panel. So we did have a question here around PSO, the in-service, pre-service orientation, and the virtual member orientation. So there was a question about, how does PSO Blend factor into this? So some of you may be familiar with PSO Blend. PSO Blend was something that we implemented for the past 2 years that was done in the first 3 weeks of a VISTA member service. It was done at their project site, and they had live sessions that they attended virtually with a facilitator. Ryan was one of our facilitators. He does facilitation for both PSO and he did it for PSO Blend. So starting in 2018, we have moved away from the PSO Blend model and we have now implemented what is called virtual member orientation. The big difference with virtual member orientation versus the PSO Blend is that virtual member orientation is really not facilitated. They have 2 webinars that they have to do, and then the remainder of the work is something that they do on their own. It's asynchronous, self-directed. So the question here was, how do you advise, we can harness what's involved in the virtual member orientation to supplement our OSOT? So that's a great question. So on the Starting VISTA page, I'm going to post a link here. There is a Starting VISTA page on the VISTA campus, and it outlines all the things that a VISTA member who is going to be going through the virtual member orientation needs to complete. And there are some recommended in-service coursework that we have for them. They are not required to take them. They don't have to turn them into us, but we highly recommend it as it really gets them prepared for service. So I would recommend taking a look at that page and looking at the in-service courses and then seeing what assignments we have there and how that can supplement your OSOT. As Ryan mentioned, there's a VAD worksheet. There is things called like 13 Lessons on Poverty. There's an assignment about the minute intro. There's a lot of great things there that you can incorporate into your OSOT to have them really integrated into the program and into your site. Ryan, do you have anything else to add on there? When you did PSO Blend, how did how would you have recommended the stuff that VISTA asked them to do, but then also getting oriented on the project? Any suggestions that you have for them?
Well, let me turn that around first with a question to you. You mentioned that the optional items are optional, meaning they're not mandatory. Could a supervisor who says, boy, that 13 lessons on poverty is really good, I want my VISTAs to do that, could a local intermediary or sub-site supervisor, single-site supervisor say, that is going to be a required part of your OSOT training? Can they build that in like that directly?
Of course.
So I think that is how I would proceed to build this and make those connections, is to look on the campus and see what's available. And we mentioned in the webinar using multimedia and using videos and other things to sort of spice up your OSOT. I would go through what's available on the campus and make some of that mandatory. I'm sort of a stickler like that in my own OSOT and training of AmeriCorps members. I take it very seriously because I want them to take it very seriously, so I'd come up with some mandatory items and then perhaps some other recommended items that they could do if they feel like that connected with them personally or professionally. But I'd take that VAD, I'd mark it up and say, here's a training on the campus, and we're going to map it to the VAD. It matches, great, we're going to require John Doe VISTA to do that, and then do the same for Jane Doe VISTA's VAD as well. The more prepared I think supervisors are, and the more, again, seriously you all take it, I think the more they're going to see this is a thing, this is something to learn, this is going to have an impact on me.
Thank you, Ryan. No, those are great suggestions, and yeah, definitely you can incorporate those into your OSOT. It's honestly, if you're already going to talk about the VAD, here's one last step for you. We've already done this worksheet, incorporate that right in. Another question came in, and I'm going to turn to Amanda and Erica. It says, Jim here says that he does a sub-site OSOT, and that provides details. What should an intermediary OSOT cover that is different? So, Amanda, Erica, how do you navigate that? One of you, Amanda, being the intermediary, Erica, you being the sub-site. How do you, I guess, delineate who should go over what? How do you do that? Let's start with you, Amanda.
Sure, that's a really great question. So first, we make sure that every year when we're sending VISTAs to PSO that we get the agenda and materials from our state office so we know what information is provided there. We do our own orientation with all of our supervisors and VISTAs separately once service starts, just to make clear, reiterate what's been said at PSO, because sometimes folks need to hear that more than once. Really what we do is just provide tools to make sure that our sub-sites are successful. And same with our VISTAs. Provide them some tools on the front end of their service to make sure that they're successful. And we don't want to throw information at them over and over and over again, but sometimes there's so much good stuff that happens at PSO that's worth repeating. So we just try to be intentional about the content that's presented there, reiterate that content with our VISTAs once they start service, and then we really leave it up to our sites to decide what they think is relevant. So Erica, I don't know what sort of stuff that you maybe do with the VISTAs once they start service in terms of kind of that orientation and training.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was going to speak a little bit to the Initiative Foundation as being the intermediary for us, and I think it's really helpful for me when I was a VISTA, having that, like, after I think it was like 3 weeks, we had a check-in at the Initiative Foundation, and it was just great to have that chance to go over all of the VISTA information again, because now that I was at the site, I understood what my site was about and a little bit more about my VAD, that it was really nice to visit what I'd learned about VISTA at the Initiative Foundation again. So that's something that I thought was really, really helpful with the intermediary organization.
I love that. I love that you came together then afterwards. So, you know, you kind of got the most of the on-site stuff, and then you guys all came back together. I think that's a wonderful way to do it. It can be overwhelming in those first couple of weeks. So, you know, not overwhelming them, I think, is probably key. But great. That sounds like you have a really good coordination in that, that it worked for you, Erica, when you were a VISTA member. So that's wonderful to hear. Another question that came in. Actually, one second. Let me check. Creighton, do you have any questions that came in over the phone?
There are no phone questions at this time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. This is a question, it's for all of you, Ryan, Amanda, Erica. Susan here asks, how do we combat when someone says VISTAs are not really volunteers because they're paid? Have you ever had that happen, or what do you say, or how do you explain really what a VISTA is, or how they're different, or have you ever had that, and how would you approach that?
Sure, this is Amanda. We are really intentional about the language we use to talk about VISTA because often that shapes people's perspective or perception of VISTAs and the VISTA program. And so we often refer to them as national service members, and we say that they receive a living allowance to cover basic housing expenses and living expenses that enables them to serve, but they don't receive a livable wage by any means. And so just making sure that you're educating people that yes, they're paid, are provided some compensation, but really these people are making a tremendous sacrifice of their time and talents and energies and finances over the year to serve as VISTA members and to participate in national service. So maybe that's helpful.
Yeah, agreed. Just to say what Amanda said again is basically like it's a stipend, and it's just covering the bare minimum in providing for food and shelter and everything like that.
I always try to use that language that the experts on the call just explained as well. I think that's really important in being consistent. But I'll be honest, at the end of the day, I did not spend a ton of time trying to convince people otherwise. If they were hard set against that concept, it just wasn't a good use of my time or energy, and usually it's a proxy for some other argument that they're trying to have that I don't have any interest in and ain't got no time for that. So I would put out, just as the women just described, the language and be really clear and open and honest about it, but then move on. Don't have a lot of time to deal with that argument.
Thank you all. We know the value of our VISTA members, and I love, Amanda, what you said, you know, saying national service members, they earn a living allowance to cover their basic needs. I think that's wonderful. So I'm going to go back one more time to Creighton. Do you have any, or Creighton, I'm sorry, do you have any questions coming in over the phone?
There are no questions on the phone.
Wonderful. Well, we are 1 minute over, and it looks like there are no more questions in the Q&A. So I want to say thank you all. Thank you to Ryan, to Amanda, and to Erica for speaking about how you have implemented OSOT, and really thank you all who've been on this session. We could not do the VISTA program without you. You really are a key to VISTA member success. So thank you for taking the time out of your days to attend. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to contact us at vistatrainingsupport@cns.gov. And once again, thank you all for everything you've done and that you continue to do. Have a wonderful day.